waiting on Ted.
Yes. Hello, Ted.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. I assume that Alberto has called the meeting to order?
Yes, I did.
Oh, great. Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see, call up my agenda here, see what we're supposed to do next. Yeah, fine, hold still. All right, then we call to order. We've done the Zoom protocol thingy. We have a quorum. Are there any members of the public there?
Excuse me, Ted. Tom Bebbington is not here, so we have to officially authorize Victor to sit in for him.
Okay, we should do that.
So I move that Victor sit in for Tom Bebbington for today's meeting.
All right, I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. Good morning, Victor. Welcome to the voting side of the street. Okay, approval of the agenda. It's particularly the standard agenda. And while I'm thinking of it, and maybe we should take a pause after we approve the agenda. If somebody would go to the business office and see if there is any expenditure requests in the trustee's mailbox, which is just inside the door of the business office. I didn't hear from Deb, so I'm assuming that there is nothing there, but we should probably be sure of that.
James is going there now to check.
Great, thanks very much. So I guess the first thing we'll need is an approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I second it.
Any discussion or amendments?
None from us.
None, hearing none. All those who in favor of approving the agenda for today's meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? The motion is carried. The agenda is approved. Minutes of May 16, 2025. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that, oh, I wrote it.
I move that we approve the minutes of that meeting.
I second the motion.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Oh, wait a minute, is there any discussion of the minutes? Any questions,
minutes, yeah.
observations, corrections? As usual, a fine set of minutes.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. It's not always easy to keep that stuff on target. Particularly when we start rambling. Anyway, any further discussion? If not, I will ask for a vote here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? Hearing none, the motion is carried and minutes of May 16th are approved. And I'll arrange for those to appear on our website. I was a little slow getting the last couple ones up, and I'll try to fix that.
Ted,
Be more
the
timely.
only thing in the mailbox was a personal confidential envelope to you from Cambridge Trust. Do you want me to just put it back in the mailbox?
Yes, I'll be back in town on Monday.
Okay. There was no expenditure request, or there
Okay,
were no.
Great, that will smooth this meeting over a little bit, but I'll mention something when we get closer there. All right, continuing business. Let's see, I'll come back to here. And review. Interesting. I guess when I'm speaking, I'm on your screen and you all disappear. I can't see you, but that's fine. So you go off and take a nap, for all I know. So update on the Land Stewardship Subcommittee and on the Doe Farm. Land Stewardship Subcommittee met in June. Don't remember the exact date, but typically the second Wednesday of the month. So that was probably June 8th. It was June 8th. And the bulk of the meeting was taken up. We did essentially a field meeting and went to Wagon Hill Farm. And with the guidance from Tom Ballesteros from the University of New Hampshire, looked at a lot of the shoreline restoration work that had been done, as well as some of the areas that are planned for some additional restoration. It was a very interesting meeting in terms of seeing what had been done, how it had been done, and what the plans were for the future. So about 300 feet of shoreline has been restored, mostly due to rising water levels. We're seeing some serious bank erosion, undercutting trees and essentially moving the shoreline inward, by, in some cases, a fairly substantial rate, at least several inches a year. In other places, less so. And so there are ways to deal with that, and the town and others have been working with Professor Ballesteros, as well as David Burt, who's a shoreland ecologist and understands a lot about marshes and stuff like that, to try and maintain that shore and reduce some of the damage, not necessarily all from rising tides, but also from people getting down onto that very fragile edge, and also dogs getting down on the fragile edge and contributing to the acceleration of the damage. So they have an additional grant to do, I believe, another 1,800 feet of shoreline. And that work will begin, I believe, sometime this year. So that was very interesting to see that. I had heard about what was going on, but actually seeing it in real life was kind of fun. We also made a stop up at the house at Wagon Hill Farm, where some serious renovations are going on. It's interesting to see and hear about that history, and to actually take a peek at some of the work that was being done. Coming right along, and now that I get a good chance to look at the house and say, yeah, it's a well-built house, it's good and solid, and it would have been a shame to let a 200-year-old house go by the wayside when it could have put to some good use. And so that project is going forward. So that's what happened in the Land Stewardship Subcommittee meeting. Anybody have any questions about that?
Nope.
None from me.
Okay. Well, good. Doe Farm. So as you saw in your email, Charlie Marino, our consulting forester for the Doe Farm, has compiled the management plan for the Doe Farm with financial support from the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, as well as from the Lamprey River Advisory Committee, through various grants that Sarah Callahan managed to help us secure prior to her change in job and that land stewardship responsibility shifting over to Ronnie Ludington. The document is big. It's 90 plus pages. Got all sorts of maps and charts and discussion in there, and it will fall to us to read through that and make any comments, provide questions to Charlie about things that are not clear. I suppose I have somewhat of a professional advantage as a forester. I kind of, it's my job to really understand exactly what he's saying and to make sure that those parts are very clear. But you all, you know, we're the trustees, we're the ones that commissioned this study, and it's for the property that we manage. So we all need, as a group, to feel comfortable with that and get updates and shifts and clarifications as needed so that we have a document going forward. The document probably will cover the next 20 years, long after some of us are gone. If not from the face of the planet, at least from the board of the trustees of the trust funds. With that in mind, a long-term document like that needs to be in good working order, so we'll cruise through that. In the meantime, the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, through the good offices of Kyle Pimentel, have looked at the document, and they're very happy with the part that they funded, which is mostly the one that has to do with climate resiliency and climate change. That's one of the parts that I've spent a little time reading in more detail, not necessarily with the eye to editing it, but just to see how Charlie had put that together. And it looks quite good, actually. And there are some editorial things that jumped out almost immediately. We are referred to as the trustees of the trust, of the trust funds.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah, so we'll have to make a suggestion that they do a universal search for that phrase and bring it up to date. So it's fairly easy to do. That was a problem on the contract, so I wonder whether after changing the contract, you didn't go back into the draft document and update that little piece as well, but small matter. James raised an interesting question by email, and that had to do with the copyright holding. And maybe I can ask James to just reiterate what his question was specifically. And I have since, I've written to Charlie and he has since written back to me, but I'll shift to James for a second.
My comment or question was the document is copyrighted by Marino and Associates, but it's a work product bought and paid for by, and that's what I'm not exactly sure whether it's by the town of Durham or by the SRPC. And I'm not familiar with consultants getting the copyright as opposed to the people who are purchasing the service. Now, we did exchange an email on that, and I do kind of agree that to the extent there is proprietary tools and documents embedded in there, I understand the need to copyright those. But the copyright here extends to the whole document.
Exactly. And so I posed that question, and Charlie provided sort of the following overview to that. One is, specifically as you note, there are some methodologies, some templates, some ways of presenting data that he has developed that he'd rather not have other people just willy-nilly use. particularly if goes into essentially a public document, and then people figure, well, we can just use whatever's in there. And that's part of it, but the bigger part is having to do with the professional licensing aspect. There is a professional license stamp on page 1 or 2 of those things, both from Charlie and from Nick. And basically, by holding the copyright, they can, in effect, control any changes to that document. If we, by way of example, were the copyright holder, we could change things in the document, but then that sort of abrogates the required professional seal on the front. And so because he's ultimately responsible for the content of that through the licensing process here in the state of New Hampshire, he feels it's imperative that he control that copyright, that we might make a change. You know, if we held copyright, if we made a change in that document that was against professional standards, his stamp is still on the front, and then he becomes liable for some of that stuff. Particularly if it was something that turned out not to be correct from a scientific point of view, or from a professional point of view, or a legal point of view, and then somebody some years from now went out and did whatever that thing was, people would turn and look and say, well, wait a minute, it says right here on this document, you should do this, and here's Mr. Marino's professional stamp on it. So it has to do with maintaining control of a professional document that's been stamped, similar to my neighbor across the street is a structural engineer, and he sticks his stamp on it. He essentially holds the copyright, and nobody else can change anything. So that's the explanation that I got from Charlie.
One thing that I notice in the document is, there are sections that are marked reserved, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. Is the information forthcoming, or?
I'm sorry, what did the document say?
Some sections are marked reserved.
In the contract?
No.
No, in the document itself.
In the document itself.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I haven't gone through
I didn't
fine-tooth
print it
comb.
out.
It may be that the template itself that he uses for management plans has other sections in it, and then which may not be applicable to what we're doing.
Exactly.
That
Okay.
might be part of it. The other is it may be just a placeholder for things that might be added at a future time. We could, as we read through it, we'll find those things.
Okay, yeah. I'm just
So,
curious.
My suggestion is that we all attack the document over the next couple, 3 weeks, and compile a list of questions and edits and get them to Charlie so that he can fix things we want to have fixed and clarify things that we need clarification on.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, so that's sort of where we are on the Doe Farm. So it's nice to see a good solid document. We've been waiting a little while for this to come to fruition, and happily, with a little prodding from the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, we were able to get this delivered to us before the end of the fiscal year. And Deb Alstrom is already handling the billing and standard of the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. So things will be moving forward, but before we completely accept the report and let Mr. Marino off the hook, we need to make sure that the document says what we want it to say. So we'll launch into a review. Any additional questions on Doe Farm?
No.
All right, report on the cemetery committee. With Tom not there, I don't recall if he sent something in.
No, in his email, he said he'll send a written report, but I don't think we've received it yet.
Okay, so at this point, we don't know if there's been, oh, I do know that there has been at least one sale of a plot, because he was going to, the next day or so, stick some things in the trustee's mailbox for me to sign, as apparently one of the duties of the chair of the trustees is to be the clerk of the cemetery committee and sign off on all the plot sales. So there's been some activity, but we don't have a report. So I guess the smart thing to do would be to have a motion to table the cemetery committee report for today.
I move that we table the cemetery report today.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? Hearing none, the motion is carried and the cemetery committee's report is tabled for today. All right. James, you've already reported that there is no expenditure requests in the mailbox, so we're sitting good there. Have people had opportunity to look at the monthly spreadsheets from MS9 spreadsheets from Lisa?
Yes, I did, and there are no new additions to the principal and no expenditures for our outlays for the month of May.
And that corresponds to my read as well. Some little adjustments in the valuation of things, as would be expected, but without expenditures, there's not a whole lot of excitement going on inside of the documents at this point. So if I could have any further, well, let's do it this way. Can I have a motion to accept the MS9 spreadsheets as submitted?
I move that we accept the MS9 reports as submitted by Cambridge Trust.
And a second?
I second.
Is there any further discussion?
None.
There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by nay. And those abstaining, same thing. Hearing none, the motion is carried and the monthly MS9 spreadsheet is hereby approved. All right, reports, issues, and the like. I want to rotate back to something. What was it?
Per your email, you mentioned that James pointed out that Cambridge Trust's benchmark is
Yes, yeah.
different from, the one approved by the trustees in the past.
That's correct. Well, I believe the benchmark mentioned in our investment policy relates to the S&P 500, whereas the benchmark that shows in the Cambridge Trust is a NASDAQ dividend-paying benchmark. And I know that we had a discussion in the trustees in the not distant past, but when Mike Everinbrand was chair, I don't remember if I was an alternate at the time or whether I was on the actual board or actual membership of the trustees, there was a discussion about changing that benchmark, and the trustees voted to do so, and there was a discussion about that. I have tried to find that in the minutes, and I have not succeeded yet. So I think the thing we should probably do is, for our next quarterly report from Cambridge Trust, is have them maybe dig up when that change was made and ask them to walk us through why that change was made. I think my vague memory of it is that that particular index tracked better with the specifics of how we're invested in terms of the combinations of fixed income, and it was less. We're not invested in the S&P 500, and the kinds of things that we've picked out to be invested in are the kind of things that Cambridge Trust has picked out for us to be invested in. I think more closely mirrors what's in that NASDAQ dividend index. But I think a reminder of how that discussion worked or went forward would be a useful thing. But I do know that Mike Evan Graham was chair at the time, so it's at least 2 years ago that the change was made, but apparently we have not updated, as James pointed out, the actual investment policy. So that's a thing we ought to address again. The combination of understanding why the change was made, maybe figuring out if we want to stick with that change, and then making sure that the investment policy document mirrors exactly what it is we say we're using for benchmarks.
And there was another one. The total portfolio benchmark, the policy indicates 5% would be the 3-month T-bill. What they actually are tracking is the 1 to 3 month T-bill, which seems like a minor change, but it's not, again, it's an inconsistency.
Yeah, it's, I think, far better to make sure things line up. So let's get, I think we probably should do this all simultaneously. We'll keep in mind this 1 to 3 Treasury thing, and then get some clarity on the change from the S&P to the NASDAQ dividend index. And then if we're happy with all that, make the changes in the investment policy document and then reapprove that and do it all in one swoop. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes.
All right. So there's those things in the investment policy. We also had, as James was trying to figure out what we're investing in, there's some lack of clarity in the Cambridge Quarterly Report column headings about how to do the valuation for some of the fixed income from the bonds kinds of things. And we did pose a question to Lisa about that, got some clarity on it, and I think maybe we can ask them to make an adjustment to the column that says unit price on it, because in the case of the bonds, it's not really a unit price, it's a percentage of face value. And so
Well, and I think your comment, Ted, was probably much simpler to implement. Instead of formatting it as a percentage, you just show it as the raw decimal.
That would work.
And
as
then the
well.
math works real straightforward, and they don't have to futz with report formatting.
Yeah, well, we'll find, this may be a standard format they use for everybody that
And,
they
yeah.
serve. So we'll
That it is.
pose that question. And maybe they'll look at it and say, oh, gee, what a great idea, and they'll fix it for everybody. Or fix it just for us, and/or just tell us to remember this because we can't change it.
Well, and if that's the report that's been going to the state, and they haven't said anything, I'm not sure it'd be worth wanting to change the format.
Well, that quarterly report's a little different. Were you looking at the quarterly report or the spreadsheet?
I think I was looking at one of the MS-10s.
Yes.
I don't know which one though.
Okay, yeah, it's going, if the state hasn't squeaked, maybe it's one of those things that, maybe they just know inherently that that's what it is, and maybe that's what they've required.
Yeah.
Either way, we'll figure it out and, go from there.
Sounds good.
All right, so those are the things that we brought up before. Oh, I know. And I guess I was somewhat disappointed we didn't have an expenditure request because James had a good question about expenditure requests as he tries to come up to speed. You want to touch on that a little bit, James?
No, because I don't remember the question. I remember my reaction being, I'm just going to schedule some time with Deb and have her walk me through how the numbers flow into the spreadsheet. I think part of my question was probably revolving around, you know, you made the comment that we don't really review the project. We just ensure that the money is being spent according to the trust purpose.
This was the,
trust.
this was the DPW lamppost issue?
It was more generic to that, because there's a bunch of trusts out there I wasn't aware of.
Okay.
And it's part of it is, well, what are then the valid purposes for each of one of the trusts? And maybe that wasn't my question, but it is now.
And I think that's the good question. In large measure, we rely on the DPW, the fire department, the school district, and the like to make the decisions about how they want to spend the money, award the scholarships or whatever it is. And they then document that and they send it to Deb, and she puts together the financial paperwork that goes with that, indicating which trust it's coming from, so on and so forth, and also includes a copy of the whatever process, the documentation of whatever process the I guess overseers of the actual funds or the use of those funds has decided. So if there's a fire department going to buy some gear, they show how they came to that decision, and it's all included in the documents that we get and review before we sign. So we know how much it is, we know where it's coming from, we know the purpose, and we know that the organization, or the part of the town that's legally constituted to oversee this expenditure has done their part. And so, we don't worry about whether the lamp post gets painted green or blue or red.
So the implication of that to me is Deb vets the requests if they're consistent with the provisions of the trust. And if they are, she has, sends it to us without comment. And I'm assuming if it's unusual or inconsistent, she'd let us know. Is that correct?
Well, she would, and it's also, I think, incumbent upon us to understand what each of the trusts are for. Most of them are like a capital reserve trust for the fire department or for DPW or the sewer district or wherever is generally pretty straightforward to look in their documentation. And the sewer district is buying pipe, and they're not buying fire trucks, and the fire department is buying fire trucks and not buying sewer pipe. That's pretty easy. The trusts are sometimes perhaps a little trickier, and we have to climb down into the language of some of the trusts. So by way of example, the Milne Trust or the Wilcox, take the Wilcox Trust, which is the one circulating around up on the idea of a solar lamp post. We could be looking at that and saying, yeah, well that, and then look at the language of the Wilcox Trust itself and say, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe there's a line in the trust that says no artificial lighting. Okay, in which case, okay, no, you can't put a lamp post there. Or you can put a lamp post there, but the trust is not going to pay for it. So those, I think some of those private trusts are probably a little more convoluted than, say, the capital reserve funds. But most of the expenditures that we've made have either come from the capital reserves, or in the case of the school district, they're scholarship funds. And we did go through a process a year or so ago of cleaning up a lot of the school district cleaned up a lot of the trusts, the scholarship trusts, and at some point we had to act to approve that and understand that and get accounts changed to mirror the process that the school was going through. So we're not relying completely on Deb for things, but particularly in the case of genuine trusts, I think it's incumbent upon us to look at the language of the trust to make sure that we're doing it right. In some cases, like the Wilcox Trust, and I think in case of my memory of most of the trusts, they're all pretty short and sweet. It's not like we have to read 45 pages of legalese. It's a paragraph at best. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So going forward, we'll be mindful of when those kinds of requests that come in that we pull up the language of the trust. Which does raise the question, gee, it would be nice to have an electronic depository of those things, wouldn't it? We wouldn't have to dig in the files every time we turned around. We could just do a quick dip into the electronic files and say, oh, here it is. Whether it's the Doe Farm Trust or the Wilcox Trust or the Milne Trust or whatever else. All right. Any other issues before the board?
I have none.
Nope.
I've reached the bottom of the agenda, gentlemen. Our next meeting is scheduled for 8:30 a.m. on Friday, July 25, and that should include our quarterly visit from Cambridge Trust. They were, that seems a little soon. That's because they were delayed in making the first quarter report from our April meeting to our May meeting. So although it's only been 2 months, it would be timely to get them back on schedule, assuming folks can make that meeting. I will reach out to Cambridge Trust to see if they're available, and also pose those couple of questions that we had from our discussion today relative to the investment policy, benchmarking, and ways to make sure that the various documents are not leading to any misreading of values and things, so we can get percentages or whatever the appropriate title is on those fixed income valuation columns. That'll help everybody out.
Just to let you know, Craig told James and me earlier that the July meeting will not be recorded.
Oh, yes.
And probably won't be on Zoom, available for Zoom.
That's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
That will also be true. Okay, we'll think about that. We usually skip one meeting in the summer, simply because, as we see today, we're done in barely a half an hour, 45 minutes or so. And things get really slow through the summertime. So maybe the July meeting is one that if Greg's not available, maybe we could skip that one. I'll send an email around to see what we can do about scheduling. I know I will not be in town on that day, and so absent Zoom, I know you all could carry on just fine without me, but I like to hear the quarterly report from our colleagues, and particularly if they're not recording, then we wouldn't even get that part to hang on to, and I think that's maybe worthy of keeping on record, at least for a while.
Yeah.
Any input on that?
Yeah, I think it's fine if we postpone or don't have a meeting in July and have the Cambridge Trust people come in August instead.
Does that strike the rest of you as a reasonable course of action?
Yes.
All right. That being the case, we will move forward with the idea that our next official meeting will be in August. But in the meantime, we should probably work to continue to review our forest management plan so that we can get the necessary changes to that done in short order. Yeah, like sometime during July.
That would make the next meeting the August 22nd meeting.
Okay? Sounds good to me.
That's what I've got on my calendar,
August 22nd?
August 22nd.
All right, well, let's shoot for August 22nd as the next official meeting. Yeah, I don't see any particular complications beyond that, but again, we can at least compile information for Charlie Marino to work on and get an update, a final version of the report before we release him from all his duties. All right, with that, if there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Any discussion or any desire to continue this torture? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed are welcome to stay.
All right, so I'll hit the gavel now. So the meeting is adjourned.